Go.
Okay, good morning. This is Blended Families Ministry coming to you live from Drew City Church, the Glendale campus. And we're going to be talking about two parenting classes today. We're going to be doing chapter 7 and chapter 8. And here's Larry.
All right, thanks, Carol. Almost backed out of the thing. Okay, let's get this back up here. All right, so Blended Families, lesson 7 of 12. And like Carol said, we are going to do 7 and 8 to get back on track. We, a couple of weeks ago, had some technical difficulties and weren't able to do the thing. So this is all about step parenting skills and the blessings of parenthood in general, and being a step parent in particular. All right. So I always like to start with some famous step parents. There's been a few times where I've seen people post on Facebook, it's like blended families are not biblical. Like practically everything was a blended family back in the Old Testament days. Multiple spouses, one guy would die, the brother would take over that whole family, and all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of blending going on back in the day. But one of the most famous, I would say, would be Joseph, who was technically the stepfather of Jesus. Right? It was the Holy Spirit that impregnated Mary, so Joseph didn't have any DNA involved in that, but he raised Jesus as his own son. And that's basically what a step parent is. You're doing the job that somebody else really should have been doing, but because of the way marriages have been on and then off and divorce and everything else over the last several hundred years, it's very common to be in a blended family these days. So another one is Mordecai, who basically raised Esther. Her parents got killed somehow, and even though he was actually an uncle, he kind of raised her up until she became the queen. And then we have Pharaoh's daughter. She raised Moses as her own son. We'll look at Exodus 2:10 out of the New King James, and it says, "And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter." Now that's Pharaoh's daughter was out by the river with her entourage of maidens and everything, and one of them heard the baby crying in the bassinet or something. Being the joke that I like to do, it's like his mom had to send him down the river, just because all the male babies were being slaughtered. And she's like, I'm not going to let that happen. So she sent him down the river, and one of Pharaoh's maidens found him and brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she brought him into the palace, raised him as a royal in the kingdom there in Egypt, and his name was Moses, because I drew him out of the water. So that's just a few examples. There were others, but these are some of the more famous ones that I like to point out. But one of the things about being a step parent is, and what we've seen over the years of counseling and everything, is a lot of people don't quite get the fact that a stepchild, it's still a great opportunity for them to be a positive influence in that child's life, right? Way too many times it's like, oh, this is one of them, pain in the butt over here, right? And they just look at them that way, and the kid feels it, but it's an opportunity to be a positive influence in a child's life. Okay, now this is pretty much just me. When I was growing up, I had a mom and a dad, right? They're the ones that did the work of raising me. So if I'm saying mother and father, it's probably because I'm referring to the biological people. And if I'm talking about mom and dad, they're like the step parent that's doing the work mostly, right? So, again, right, that's what I said. Okay, so mom and dad's going to be the majority of the person doing the majority of the work of raising God's kids. That's one of the things we always talk about in the class is how when we end up talking about the pyramid is it's important to realize that you're a steward of God's kids and not an owner of your kids. Okay? When you get that attitude and that way of looking at things, it makes things go a lot better. So, as much as children are a gift from God, it is vital to remember that so is your spouse. Like in the prayer the other day, right? This gift that God has given me, right? Your spouse will most likely be around a lot longer than your kids. In the house, especially. As we had talked about in one of the first lessons, the marriage relationship has to have a higher priority than the parent-child relationship. That's what the pyramid has there. Your job as parents is to demonstrate to your children how to be godly spouses and parents. So your job as a parent is to show them how to do marriage God's way and to raise them to be independent, productive, godly people. Right? As Christians, we shouldn't have our kids living in our basement till they're 35. Okay? We should have been teaching them to be independent. They have to answer to God for whatever they're doing and their choices and the consequences and all that kind of stuff. Okay, now, even if it's yours, mine, and ours, so I have some, you have some, and we have one or two, yours, mine, and ours, there has to be one set of rules for all the children. That's why we recommend being the steward of all of them because they all belong to God versus mine, yours, ours. Carol can vouch for what happens when she disappeared. I didn't even see her leave. But she was a second wife to her second husband. And he had kids from before. She had kids from her first marriage. And eventually they had one of their own. But there was different sets of rules for all the different groups. Right? He treated his kids different than her kids. Her kids were more second-class citizens in that household. And ultimately, they all got abused, molested and abused. So, again, it's all of these children, whoever they came from, are God's, and we're supposed to train them up in the way they should go. And when they're old, they won't depart from it. So they do depart when they're young, I guess. And then they come back at some point. But with shared custody, then it needs to be our house, our rules. You can't dictate what happens in the other house. Same thing applies. It's their house, their rules. You have your standards. You teach according to those standards. And you and your spouse today have to communicate and agree on the parenting issues. So, again, your marriage, this one right now, is the most important one. The old one is the old one. It's not your marriage anymore, right? But there's a lot of baggage that needs to be sorted out. And what we have seen over all these years is that the exes tend to want to manage your marriage. Some are very vindictive. Some are okay. Some people are better off with the ex than they were as a spouse. Not very often, but it happens. Usually they're more vindictive, and their job is to destroy you and to poison the kids against you and all that kind of stuff. So that's more in chapter 8. But we will get into some of that. But it's important to communicate and agree on parenting issues so that you can have the power and authority to lead your children in the way they should go. Right? When you're in agreement, okay, that's where the power is. If this one wants to do this and that one wants to do the other thing, what's the kid going to do? Like, it's chaos, right? So it's really important to, and this is like you and the new guy, right? The new spouse, whichever way. Now, I didn't bring any children into this relationship. I inherited her 3, and so that made things a little simpler because I didn't have to worry about yours, mine, and ours or any of that kind of stuff. It was just hers. And I saw my role is to find a way to relate to them on their level and be the positive influence that I thought I should be. So that's kind of where I was on our deal. But when there is yours, mine, and ours, it's very important to just be in agreement, because that's where the power is. If there's disagreement about the parenting, you're just going to be suffering. And it's just, that's the way it is. So it's so important to have that agreement. Okay. Generally speaking, children under 12 blend easier than kids 12 and over. Well, in that 10, 11, and 12, it can get a little iffy, but up to about 10 or so, they still want to be part of something. But you get up to about 12, then they don't want to be part of anything, especially you and this new thing you got going. So their job is to test you as parents. That's their job. And they will frequently do things to test the boundaries and your will to enforce the rules. Older children tend to rebel more, but we'll get into that in chapter 8 because we're dealing more with the dark side of step parenting. Agreement on that?
Oh, yeah.
The younger they are, the better they blend. The older they are, the worse it is.
Like they have more time to get used to you when they're younger, because it's kind of, you're just not this outside person just trying to destroy their life. It's just
Right.
like, oh, it's a new person.
Yeah. And, you know, if you come in with the right attitude, it's more positive and, you know, you're loving and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh, this isn't so bad. But, you know, the teenagers, it's their job to rebel.
But in one of our classes, we had a couple that were a blended family that he had twin boys that were 11. And they did not respond to her very well at all. They always gave her a lot of trouble. And she was talking about it one of the mornings in our class. One of the other couples in our class spoke to her, the guy, after class, and he said, I was one like your 11-year-old twins, that I didn't want to hear anything my stepmom told me when I was 11, but let me tell you, she's my best friend today. They may look like they're not listening, but they're listening. So don't give up. I thought that was awesome when Jason went and shared that with her.
Yeah.
So even though they act like they're not listening, they are. And we just have to trust that, okay?
Yeah. Okay, so let's see, did I do that one? Yeah. Okay, so we're mostly focusing on all the positive stuff about step parenting, and then the next class is more about the negative side of it. So the next several slides here are just going to have some scriptures that relate to raising godly children. And we'll go through these kind of quick. Children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. So having children is a good thing. God sees it as a blessing because, I mean, we're created to have relationship, and who better to have than your own kids, right? So again, it's attitude. Obviously, this is spiritual warfare stuff. Your kids are going to be used as tools against you because you love them and that kind of thing. The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. So we're kind of talking about the legacy here. If you do a really good job, a godly job of being a father, and in this case to all the kids, whoever's they are, you'll be leaving a good legacy. You'll be proud of the job that you've done. You'll see in their life that they got it, right? Most of these are Proverbs. Even a child is known by his doings, whether his work be pure and whether it be right. When I was growing up, it was out in the country, not that many people around really, but everybody knew whose kids were who. And they knew which ones were the troublemakers, right? And that's kind of what this is saying. Even a child is known by what he does. So the community is going to know who the riffraff is. Children's children are the crown of old men. That's grandchildren. And the glory of children are their fathers. Okay, fathers. Children get their name from their fathers. If the father has been doing a good job, he's an upstanding person in the community, the child is like, I'm good, I'm okay. But the opposite applies if, dad has been, some sort of criminal type. The son has to live with that. So again, we're talking legacy here. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Now, the great thing about being a Christian is you're a new creation. You can start today to create a new legacy, not based on whatever the old stuff was. But one of the things that's kind of a thread through here is how important the fathers are. So, teaching, correction, discipline, and punishment, we're going to talk about that a lot more in lesson 9. But as parents, it's really important to set boundaries, reinforce the boundaries, break bad behavior, and create new ones, enforce penalties for bad behavior. In lesson 9, we have a little staircase thing. Each one of these things is like a step, and each one is a more severe form of teaching. Right? It's really all teaching. Like, for example, you have to teach. You got to set the boundaries so the kid knows what's right, what's wrong. And then you kind of turn them loose, and then if they get outside the box, then you have to reinforce the box, right? But if they continue to do that, now it's like you got to break the bad behavior. So now there's discipline in there, that kind of thing. But that's more in lesson 9. And Kenyatta is going to take care of that one for us. Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, I didn't used to think too much of that and when he's old part, but it really kind of fits me because I got trained up in the way I should go, and then I totally departed from it until I'm like 50. And then it's like, oh crap, I need a do-over. And so that's, now I see when they're old, they'll get back. They're going to go out, spread their wild oats, and get in trouble, but there needs to be the consequences of the bad decisions so that they learn that, oh yeah, God's way is the way. Foolish. Now the next two or three we get into trouble with CPS. Okay. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, so you don't need to teach him how to be bad. It's in there. But the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Like I said, we're not allowed to hit the kids, especially with a rod. You know, we had the switches. In my house, we had the board of education.
Got the flip-flop.
Flip-flops, yeah. Wooden spoons, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that was like a no-brainer back in those days. Yeah, we had this nice paddle with my name on it, had holes in it, you know. Up until about 14, and then it was like, okay, we're done with that. But, you know, today the kids call CPS on you.
Anything is child abuse.
Yeah.
Take away the toys, it's child abuse.
Something knows or something is child abuse.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
daughter tried to throw that at me the other night, as I told her, you need to eat all your food. That's child abuse. No, it's not. Let me go get the flip-flop and we'll show you.
Yeah. That's not even child abuse.
I know.
That's discipline,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
See, we were disciplined, right? I was an only child, so I was on a pretty short leash most of the time. And, yeah, that is true. Withhold not correction from the child, for if you beat him with the rod, he shall not die. All right? Again, CPS. And that's why we have what we have. Because 2 or 3 generations ago, Dr. Spock came along, oh, don't hit your kid. All right? He messed up many generations of children. Hear, children, the instruction of a father, and attend to know understanding. So, again, it's the father's job, as well as the mom's, to instruct out of love. Because you love your kid, you want them to do well, right? And you want your children to understand, especially what the Word of God is, so that he's able to make wise decisions. And 5:7 is kind of the same thing. Hear the words and do not depart from them. Listen to what I'm telling you, right? And the 7:24 is kind of the same thing. 8:32. Now therefore, listen to me, O children, for blessed are they that keep my ways. Okay, this is the positive side of everything. You know, if you hear what my words are, if you do what I'm telling you to do, you will be blessed. Very minor consequences. But if you're out there just doing whatever, major consequences. All right. Well done, good and faithful servant. The parent's legacy. Okay, that first part was what our job is. This is what we're supposed to be doing, right? This part is the legacy, what the Word says about what happens when we've done a good job. 25:21 in Matthew, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So that's what we all want to hear, is well done, good and faithful servant. My understanding of heaven is there will be jobs to do based on what we do here. There'll be generals, there'll be colonels, there'll be sergeants, various things. There'll be the guy sliding in that gave his life to Christ on his last breath. He'll probably be sweeping up after the elephants in the parade. But he's in heaven, which is all that really matters. But, the size of the mansions will depend on, some of our works. We can't get there based on works, but what we do determines what happens there. Okay. A good man leaves an inheritance to his grandchildren. The wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. One example of that is Warren Jeffs, the polygamist. Our church got his property. He's in prison.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a polygamist is.
Well, that's the kind of the Mormon, the fundamental Latter-day Saints, FLDS, multiple wives,
Yeah,
right?
I understand now, yeah.
Yeah, and he had like 80 some.
It's a lot of
Talk about greed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, he was a prophet,
Yeah.
right?
Pregnant, he went 13.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he went to prison for child abuse, right? Ultimately, and for a very long time. And somehow in there, God worked it out that wife number 65 got his property. She gave it to the Dream Center. So they're turning all of his estate up there into a Dream Center. Totally changing the landscape of what's going on up there. I mean, it's very evil stuff going on up there. I mean, they didn't even have a grocery store. And so they've had to ship food in and all kind of stuff. But that's kind of what that last scripture was talking about. You know, the evil, the godless can create all kind of wealth, but then what? They leave it somewhere. They can't, you can't take it with you. So that's just one of those ways God has turned what was evil into something good.
Where's this place at?
What's that?
The place in Utah?
Something.
Well, it's right up at the border, Colorado City. It's like right on the border between Utah and Arizona. It's like right on the border. It's like, I think they outlawed that in Utah. So he's just this side of the state line, and it was legal, I guess. Maybe it's not now, I don't know. But yeah, he ended up like 80 some wives, mostly teens, and who knows how many kids. But yeah, it all went south on him, and now God's using it for his glory. Proverbs 31:28. 31 is what a godly wife is. Her children arise up and call her blessed, and her husband also, and he praises her. So when we have a godly wife, if we're not, we better be praising her. Okay? It's her due. But the more godly somebody is, the more respectable they are. Even the people that don't like God, it's hard to argue with somebody that's decent. Although cancel culture these days does make it a little tougher. Proverbs 10:1, the Proverbs of Solomon: a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. Right? So when the father's done a really good job and the kid's doing well, I mean, like our grandson, the tuft and needle guy, pretty proud of him. He did good. His parents did a really good job raising them. Our son, not so much. Weighs heavy on her. I didn't have anything to do with it. I can claim innocence there. But he was abused by the other guy. And he just, even to this day, holds it against her. Just for marrying the guy. Right? She didn't do it. He did, but she got in there, and that was the result. So, not saying he's foolish, but he's unforgiving. So, it weighs heavy on her heart that he's not doing what should be. Dads are proud, moms worry about their kids, basically. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. Like Warren Jeffs, for example, his name's going to rot. there was a study done many years ago. There was a family named Edwards, very Christian oriented, but they had a lot of doctors, lawyers, like senators, that kind of stuff, prominent people in the community. And there was like 300 and some of them over several generations, of course. And then they talked to another family name that most of them were drunks, prostitutes, criminal types. Nobody remembers them. And they only really had about 100 or so people because they either died early or they were too selfish to have kids. And so, but the other one, that was all about the family and the name, and there were a lot of them, and there were a lot of prominent, successful people. And that just kind of shows that. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. Again, when we're following the Word of God, we are blessed. More good things happen than bad things. It's like when we put the armor of God on every day, we don't know the kinds of things that didn't happen that could have been bad. And it's just, good day, right? We don't have a clue what was going on in the spirit realm that could have been a major attack just because we had our armor on. Once you've raised God's children, you have to give them back to Him. Yeah, that's why we like to say, when you look at yours, mine, ours as God's kids, and you understand that your job is to train them up in the way they should go, and then we have to give them back. That's what being a steward is, right? It's not our property, but we're in charge of making sure everything goes well. So that's one of the things about the positive end of doing this is you have an opportunity to raise God's children and make them godly offspring, which is what He wants. But at some point, everyone has to give an account of themselves to God. So at some point, on the pyramid over here, we generally are talking somewhere between 18 and 25. 18, legally, you're an adult. Some people keep their kids on their medical insurance till they're 25 or 6 or something. So, there's that, going to college years and those kind of things where you still help them out. But technically, they have to answer for themselves. And again, we're supposed to raise independent children who understand who God is, what His Word says, and those kind of things, so that they can make wise decisions. And if we don't pay any attention to them, let the teenagers run wild through the city, they get in all kind of trouble, they have no idea who God is, and they end up dealing with the consequences later. And then moms are totally upset. Dads are like, whose kid is that? Okay, so once you've done your job, you got to trust God. That's the whole point in raising them up in the way they should go. And when they're old, they shall not depart from it. So, yeah, we all have our pride to deal with. We got to do it our way. We know better than anybody else. All that kind of stuff. But sooner or later, you got to give God His children back. I always say, they're God's kids. You got to give them back. You can keep your spouse.
That's not what it says. That's your Bible.
Yeah, it does. You can infer that from Job, right? Job lost
That's your translation.
everything except his wife.
Your translation, Larry.
Well, it's my understanding. But you think about it. He got he had 10 kids. He lost all of them. He lost all of his livestock, his house. Satan came in and just took everything. He never did anything to the wife. If you look at it that way, you're one flesh. God said, Yeah, you can mess with him, just don't kill him. Well, his wife is part of him, right? It's that one flesh thing. Now, if they were separate fleshes, he probably would have lost his wife. But no, they're one entity in God's eyes. So, yeah, he didn't touch the wife either. He didn't even make her sick, just Job. But then he ended up with another 10 kids, and he had like twice as much livestock and all this kind of stuff. So God returned everything that he lost and then some, but he still had one wife. So, as you've seen, if you've done a really good job, your children will be a blessing not only to you, but to many others. If you've been a slacker, you may well suffer even more than your children. Today, we see so many grandparents raising the grandkids because the parents are like nowhere to be found. So the grandparents have to deal with their poor job by raising the grandkids, which it's usually the grandparents' job to spoil the grandkids and then give them back, right? Keep them all day, give them back. Give them sugar just before they go home, and then they're all over the place, right? Okay, so that's it for lesson 7. We're going to take a quick break here.